Thank you so much to the IAA for this invitation. It's always a pleasure to be able to share some thoughts and insights from other parts of the world with all of you. So I have prepared a short presentation which I'll go through, and that perhaps help guide our conversation and guide your questions. So hopefully this will now work. If I switch to share screen, you will be able to see in a moment my presentations. So what I want to talk to you about is rather than 5 trends, is to talk to you about 5 imperatives for mobile. And by that I mean things that mobile is affecting that mean that, that marketers and agency people have to do something differently. And the first thing I would just make sure that I would give you is a definition of mobile marketing. So this is it for me. Mobile is about connecting, engaging, and influencing customers with and through mobile. And the with and through bit is important because we talk about mobile as being both the device and the channel. And as you said in the intro, I've worked in mobile marketing for around 10 years now. And what I can tell you is that mobile is around the world is similar but different. So there's a strong likelihood that what I'm going to share with you in mobile marketing, some of which you'll already see and be doing in India, other parts you'll think this is completely new and different for us, and still others you'll look at and say, well, this wouldn't work here in India. The point here is to look at what is happening around the rest of the world and learn from that and see how it can be adapted to the Indian marketplace. So there's 3 big trends that I note that have really been pushed by mobile over the last 3-4 years in particular. The first is that brands in the marketing sense are becoming much more about platforms led by content and engagement. They are creating 2-way relationships with their consumers, and that mobile is acting as a bridge between both the physical and the digital world. So that's what I'd like to kind of keep in mind in the background of when I go through each of these 5 imperatives. Oh, sorry, it says 6 here, I should say 5. The first of those is that mobile around the world is really driven by behavioral change. And by that I mean that what mobile does is it causes and enables an irrevocable change in our behavior as consumers. Once you know that as a consumer that you can click and find, click and do, click and buy on mobile, it has to change the way in which you think. And that's pretty common around the world. The way in which it adjusts and changes our behavior is what varies per marketplace. People often talk about the world being divided into digital immigrants and digital natives. I actually think that we're moving towards a world of digital dependence, people who would give up any other channel before they would give up mobile. But I want you to focus more not on mobile as a technology, but actually mobility as a concept, and think about what mobility means to your consumers and how your customers are using mobile. So in other words, I want you to focus on the reaction to the technology and not the technology itself. If you were joining the webinar today hoping to hear about mobile tech, then I'm the wrong guy for that. I'm a marketing guy, and I've only ever been interested in how you can use the technology to better engage with consumers. So our mobile consumer is looking for a whole set of different things than we were looking for before from other channels. And in fact, we're looking for mobile to fulfill at least 8 different need states, because we know that mobile can do all of these things on screen. So as a marketer, you have to keep these things in mind, as this is the mindset of the mobile consumer, and this is what they're looking for. Our second imperative is around thinking about how mobile is becoming multi-screen. And for many of us in parts of the world, that means that we're watching television at the same time as having a mobile phone, or we are listening to the radio and having a mobile phone. But in particular, the television and mobile thing has become really prevalent. And many people around the world now do not watch any television without having a mobile in their hand or to hand, in order to both engage with each other and connect with their world, but also to connect with what they're watching on the screen. So the challenge for brands is that how do you create content that matches both with the programming and with the advertising. And an example of this that I think works particularly well is from this US show called The Walking Dead. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, but it's a show about a kind of apocalyptic future full of zombies. The show has a companion app which allows you to play along with the program and decide whether you think what decisions people should make about whether they should go into a building or not, whether they should drive to somewhere or not, and perhaps most amusingly, ask you to work out how the next zombie will die in the program, whether they'll be killed with an arrow to the head or a bullet to the head. What we're finding is that people are enjoying playing along with the program, and that their mindset is being changed to think that programming and broadcasting is not one way, and there is a way of participating in this. Of course, at its lowest possible level, this is the kind of thing that we're doing all the time when we're using text to vote for people in talent shows. Our third thing, imperative to think about, is around contextual relevance. I think that contextual relevance is the big USP of mobile. By that I mean mobile gives us the ability to send the right message to the right person at the right place in the right time. Mobile is unique in giving us the ability to hit all four of those things simultaneously. What I think that does for marketers is it allows you to move from thinking about just demographic data to using contextual data. So that may be something as simple as when you're checking in on social media like Foursquare, you get an advert that tells you where the nearest coffee shop is and how to get to that coffee shop. But actually, if you combine that together with thinking about what people might be doing when they get to a location, it allows you to move from simply using historic data about what consumers have done in the past to predictive data of what you think they'll do next. A great example of this comes from the UK from last year. There's a series of classical music concerts that we call the Proms. And last year, one of the mobile phone networks used geofencing to put a ring around the biggest concert hall in London called the Royal Albert Hall, and then all of the bus and underground railway stations as well. If you bought your ticket for any of the events using the ticket service from that operator, when you left the underground station or got off your bus, they knew who you were, exactly where you were going, how long it would take you to get there, and what kind of music you were listening to or you were going to listen to when you got there. So they were then able to send you targeted offers that was for CDs for music from similar artists to the ones that you were about to hear. That simple act managed to help the record company Decca increase their sales in 1 month by 160% because it used better targeting available to them through mobile. So what you're going to find as a brand is you're going to start to collect more and more data on people, not just the data you can access through a mobile operator, but the data that you can access from a whole range of places, and you'll layer on top of that data you can get from bigger data sources like the social networks and mobile operators and supermarkets, and create a much better contextual way of contacting, connecting with consumers. That does mean that the job of marketers is also going to change. We're going to actually have to get better at managing data science, and actually, as a lot of people have put it before in the past, we're going to have to move from being madmen to mathmen, to being less about the creative and actually more about the numbers behind how we connect with people. The reason for that is because we know that this big data can influence small decisions, and that's what the whole big data story is about. Our fourth imperative is to think about the way in which mobile is changing retailing. As I said, mobile is a way of connecting both the physical and the digital worlds together, and in Western Europe and the US, mobile is already influencing around 19% of all sales in retail stores. That's because mobile is influencing every point in the path to purchase that a consumer has, and is in fact present at every single moment of truth. So if you look at a kind of linear customer journey, mobile is good at gaining awareness through things like mobile advertising. It's also good at driving people into stores. So as a couple of examples of way that's being done really differently, with mobile couponing in the US, this particular example is driving redemption rates over 50% because they've worked out how to give people both contextually relevant coupons, but also make sure the coupons are right for the size of the screens and make sure they use correct design to get there. A much more interesting way, though, of using it rather than just trying to replace paper couponing is something that Starbucks are doing in the US, which is allowing people to tweet a friend a coffee. So that allows you to connect your Starbucks account to Twitter send a tweet to a friend mentioning Starbucks, and then they're able to get a gift which they can redeem at a Starbucks coffee house. Simultaneously getting you to spend more money with Starbucks, directing somebody to go in store, building up Starbucks' social media presence, and perhaps creating a new customer. Fantastic way of using mobile as the connection between the digital and physical worlds. A lot of brands across the US and Western Europe and other parts of the world indeed are worried about the effect that mobile has through this thing called showrooming, which is where we're going into a store and we're using mobile to find out the price of a product and buying it somewhere else. Some brands are afraid of this, but actually what I would say is the smarter way of doing things is to use mobile to engage with people in stores and make the in-store experience even better than it could be. So this example from Brazil shows you that actually Unilever as a brand are mobile enabling the products they sell on the shelves so that you can scan those products with your mobile phone or your mobile device and find out more information about where the product comes from, nutritional advice, and indeed shopping and cooking recipes. This example from the US is saying it's actually a clothing store that is completely mobile enabled. So only one example of every product is on show. You can scan that product with your mobile phone. A sample of the product in your size is then delivered to a dressing room or a changing room where you can go and try it on. The dressing rooms are Wi-Fi enabled so that you can take a photograph of yourself and those and send them to other people and get their opinion on them. If you then want to buy the product, you then scan it again and buy it with your mobile phone. We can also use mobile to reward people for the shopping experience. Fantastic example is there's an app called Shopkick. What Shopkick does is reward people just for the act of shopping itself. So just going to the mall, going to an individual store, going down a particular aisle, picking up a particular product and scanning it with your mobile phone all gives you points you can then redeem for something else. They do, of course, also redeem, give you points to redeem against purchases. But the point here is that we're using the mobile channel to direct people. And what we're seeing is the advent of what we would call directed shopping, the use of mobile technology throughout the process of shopping and throughout the customer journey to change the way in which people behave. It's also a smart thing to do to think about this engagement in store does not necessarily just have to be about trying to entertain people or reward them. It can be just providing them with something of use. So this example from the US from a pharmacy allows people to scan the side of their prescriptions, orders it for them, tells them when it's in stock, tells them when they need to refill it. So it's just providing something of extreme use to their consumers, and once people are hooked on this, they tend not to go and buy from somewhere else. We can also look at extending that into the next part of the customer journey into delivering service. Some of the more interesting things that are happening here delivered through mobile devices come from some of the big four players. The big four players in the internet world, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, are also the big four drivers in much of the change in the mobile space. So this example from Amazon is their Kindle device includes a button that you can press called the Mayday button that allows you to get instant access to a live video support, customer support person. We're also seeing across cities in the US same-day delivery through buying through Google, and you may have also seen the quirky news story about Amazon starting to deliver product to people using drones flying across the states to drop something off them. Does this mean that you have to have live video conferencing to deliver customer service or same-day delivery or drones? No, it doesn't. But what it does mean is that these are signals of intent from these biggest companies who are looking at the ways in which mobile can change the relationship between them and their consumers and the way in which they deliver customer service to those people. The important part here, though, is not the technology itself, but the services that those people are layering on top of it. There's also a way to reward the loyalty of your customers, which of course is the end of our customer journey. We want to complete the loop and get people to be more and more loyal to us. And mobile is delivering something there that's better as well. I actually believe that mobile will replace all other forms of customer loyalty schemes, particularly those delivered via plastic cards. Because what mobile does that plastic cards can't do, and it solves the biggest problem of loyalty schemes for retailers. I think the biggest problem is that in most cases the retailer doesn't even know that their loyal customer or their interested customer is in the store until they leave and they swipe a card when they're leaving. This example from the UK is where a DIY or a hardware brand has changed from using plastic cards to using a mobile app. That app recognizes you when you come in the store and then delivers a way of engaging with you in the store, and it has a real ROI. The people who have this app spend more money on average than any of their other customers. So there's a real point and a real ROI for their loyalty scheme. I think that mobile will end the use of plastic cards. So the smarter brands, therefore, are using mobile throughout the entire customer journey. They're looking at all the touch points along their customer journey, and they're figuring out a way in which mobile can be used to extend or enhance that customer journey. And this is the one from Starbucks, which is an example of that. So for me, mobile is going to deliver a converged future where it does all of these things from the customer journey all at the same time, all at once. The one thing that we need to think about through all of that is that most of that process is enabled by the use of more and more data. And a lot of people around the world are concerned about the data that's being captured through mobile and how it affects our privacy. So the last imperative for you to think about is how mobile affects the way in which we view privacy. I would ask marketers to think about privacy as not being a binary thing that we can turn on or off, or as Seth Godin memorably said, permission is a process and not a moment. So in other words, what we're looking at is saying, just because I've opted in to receive a communication from you once does not mean that you can send to me information forever. It means that I have to continually get your permission, continually get your opt-in, because permission is at the heart of making this big data world work in the mobile sense. So we're starting to think as consumers more about the data as being my data rather than just data that's about me. And in fact, we will, rather than sell our data back, I suspect that in the future we will think about buying back our privacy. And the challenge for brands, therefore, is to use that data in a way that balances the creepy with the clever. So, in conclusion, what I'm saying to you is that if you're going to make a success of using the mobile channel, you're going to have to think about using that big data and contextual data in a way that is relevant to us, that continues to be respectful of our privacy, and that above all else gives us a value exchange if we're going to share that data with people. I don't actually want you to think about becoming mobile first companies. I actually want you to think about becoming customer first companies with mobile at the heart of delivering that experience.
Thank you, Paul. Excellent presentation. I think puts a fair number of things in perspective. Bitul, would you have a question for Paul?
Yeah. Hi, Paul. That was a great presentation. Like you said, that privacy is not binary, and we must ask users if they are happy with what we are serving them. So I wanted to know that would it be annoying for the users if we continuously ask them again and again whether we should deliver content to them or not?
So I think there are ways, simple ways of managing that permission and opt-in that don't necessarily mean you're asking people every single text message or every single time you contact them and do it. There's some basic principles to adhere to here around transparency, notice, and choice. So what we do is we make it very transparent and clear when we're trying to collect data and what we want to do with that data. We give people notice that we are collecting data, and we give them a choice as to whether we can use that data or not. Once we have adhered to those principles and we're building an opt-in base of a permission base of people who've opted into our communications, we make it easy for them and clear to them how they can opt out in the future. What we should be doing is not just collecting the opt-in itself and the simple data that says yes, you can communicate with me, but really understand people's preferences, understand the things that they are interested in, and only communicate to them at those times. So in that example I give you about B&Q, the loyalty app, The smart thing they're doing there is using this process of dynamic opt-in, which is they only communicate through me to me when I walk into the store, because that's the time I've given them permission to talk to me about it. So it's using those basic principles to manage that, rather than thinking of, do I have to ask you every single time? I just have to make it clear that it's possible for me to be in control of the use of that data.
Namrata, would you have a question for Paul? Namrata runs a fashion company, online fashion company.
Hi, Paul. That was really interesting, all the examples you shared. I was just wondering, like a lot of them were connecting the offline to online, so when you're selling a physical product. But do you have any examples of like contextual, and specifically when it comes to mobile, like we know about, Google doing contextual targeting based on content and the kind of content you're reading. But for example, like my company does fashion content. So would there be any examples of how mobile can be used to kind of engage the customer, to keep them coming back to read content? Is there something that's been done which you think was something really out of the box and not your usual, just targeting?
Yeah, actually, I've seen some really great examples of this all over the world. From there's a fashion blog in China, and I'll remember the name of it in a moment and put it on the screen for you. That changed to being an app that it aggregates together all the fashion blogs that you're interested in, and then allows you to click directly onto the products that people are talking about, and then go and buy those. But I've also seen loyalty schemes run based around interesting content in different parts of the world. So there's a really interesting thing in South Africa that is using mobile web and USSD, so really simple technology, to create loyalty schemes for cooking oil and flour. Two products that I would have thought before now it was impossible as a commoditized product to create any kind of loyalty around them. But in fact, these examples in South Africa have done them really well. What they do is they provide people with interesting content around cooking, and then relate to cookery programs that are on television, and then kind of relate back how their products could be used within that. So they provide people with cooking tips, and also obviously then with kind of promotional offers to go and get people to buy those. Those two examples are at totally opposite ends of the scale. One is using apps, and the other is just using the most simple of technologies. So I'll look for the names of the products involved for you there, and then post them here onto the site.
That would be great. That would be very good. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Paul. We have with us Hemang Pandit. He runs an online astrological advice company, which has a call center and a website. Hemang, would you have a question for Paul?
I just wanted to ask, do you have any examples around very highly personalized services like ours, personalized and to a certain extent private, because people don't want to kind of reveal their horoscopes and their details very publicly? Do you have any such examples wherein people are using it in a way to kind of provide better services or increase their ROI or something like that?
Yeah, is your service based around SMS or mobile web or app? How narrow it down?
Well, it's all of the three, and also voice, that is dial-in services.
Okay. All right. So I'll give you one that's a very personal one, because I have lots of experience of using apps day to day. My favorite app is one called Strava. Strava is something that tracks all of my running and cycling, because I'm kind of obsessed with those things. And I could just keep all of Strava data personal, so it could just be my information about where I've run and how far I've run. But it also enables me, if I want to share it with a limited number of people. So I can share with friends, where I've been running and riding, and in fact I can compare where I've run and how fast I ran with them running it as well. So we don't have to run together, but if we run the same stretch of road on different days, it will compare my time against their time and allow me to create what they call segments on any run or any ride that allows us to compare the two things together. We can choose to share that to a much bigger, broader, open world if we want to. So in this way, kind of what Strava has done is create both a very personal thing, which I can access for myself, but also through the use of gamification, if you like, so me comparing myself with other people, created something that I might want to share more publicly. So that's a kind of personal version of that. If I'm just thinking now of other highly personalized services. Yeah, give me a moment, and I'll think of some other relevant examples from that use more technology at the other end of the scale. Because I think in the app world, it's really easy to think of highly personalized things. I mean, that's everything from the way in which we use social media to the way in which we use apps which connect and look at our weather, to those that are allowing us to create our own aggregated news stories, so things like Flipboard or Mashable that allow us to select the news that we're interested in. I think those are pointing in the direction of, if you like, take a service which could be open to everybody and then allow us, through explaining our preferences, we go back to that again, explaining our preferences, to narrow it down to a much smaller area of interest for us.
I have Mr. Manish Advani, who's co-chair of the initiative. Manish, you had a question for Paul?
Yes, so Paul, my question is, well, like, what would be your recommendations, like cost-effective recommendations for mobile marketing, especially for companies which are into B2B business?
Yeah, so I mean, normally B2B is a little bit slower at picking up on some new channels. I think there's a really simple way to work out a mobile strategy for any business, that's B2B or B2C. And I alluded to it a little bit when I was looking at that Starbucks example, but I think that what they've done has been mirrored by quite a number of other companies. They've mapped out their entire customer journey, and they've looked at all the touch points along that customer journey and the media that they currently use there. And then they've looked at how can we use mobile to extend or enhance what we're currently doing. And I think the challenge that B2B brands often have is they think that somehow they have to match the way in which B2C brands use mobile for entertainment and for brand building. And actually, I think the biggest story for B2B brands is around mobile for utility and services. So as an example here, there's a courier delivery business called DPD Packaging in the UK. They have switched to using text messaging, SMS, to notify people when a parcel is about to be delivered. So what happens is that you get a text message that says the parcel is about to be delivered to you and gives you a time frame in which that will be done, so in the next 45 minutes. But what it does is it gives you the option to say, do you want us to continue to deliver that, or do you want to use one of the other three alternatives? Book a new time, leave it with a neighbor, or leave it in a secure place. What they discovered was that they cut down on the number of bad deliveries where, where the driver turns up and there's nobody there to accept it, or there's nobody there to sign for the product. And in the first, I think, 6 months worth of operation, they saved more than £1 million by putting this in place. So for them, mobile is about efficiency. What I'm seeing in a lot of the B2B world is that actually people are using mobile for services, but they're also using mobile for enterprise solutions. So I'm seeing a lot of big brands using mobile for to enable the way in which they, if you like, communicate with their supply chain or with partners, and they're using it for efficiency and for money saving. So it's a very different mindset than the one that says this is about entertaining customers or providing some kind of brand boost.
Our next, Gaurav Mendiratha, who runs a social media and software company. Gaurav, do you have a question for Paul?
Yep, absolutely. Hi, Paul. Thanks for the great presentation and thanks for taking the time. Since I run a social media company, my question is more around social media. You gave a great example of Starbucks and the use of Twitter. But what I wanted to understand is that now even Facebook sees almost 50% of their usage coming from social media, while WhatsApp and similar applications like Line and WeChat are claiming 100 million plus users as well. How do you see social media evolving on the mobile space? I mean, WhatsApp doesn't have much for brands, but brands want stuff on social media. How do you see that social ecosystem changing because of mobile?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, the starting point, as I'm sure you'd agree with, is that social is mobile. It's not a desktop device. It's migrating away from being something you do on desktop. Almost all social activities, are taking place in the mobile space. I think, though, we are still at early days in terms of finding effective ways for brands to use the space. So Facebook do have some good examples of the way in which brands have used advertising, but a lot of it I've seen, in all frankness, has been fairly crude attempts at creating a Facebook page and then asking people to like them on the Facebook page or on the Google Plus page or what have you, but without any real thought as to what they're trying to do with that. I think the challenge here for brands is that they need to get used to the idea that social is a two-way platform, and that actually, even more so, mobile is a two-way platform. And our expectation as consumers is that, we will want to engage, and we actually want to have a voice in communication with our brands. So, in fact, what social is showing us is that consumers are there to participate. And so I actually think that the challenge is that brands have got to find a more effective way and switch off from the mindset that's about broadcast in order to promote, and think about how would we get customers to participate in some way. And there have been some reasonable examples of that, of brands using it to ask customers to select a new flavor of a product or a new variant of a product, of brands asking customers to engage with them in order to select a destination for an event they're running. So one of our clients, for instance, is Manchester United, and they use mobile to connect with fans during match games and ask fans to participate with them and select the team ahead of the game, look to make, what would they do in terms of substitutions during a game and that kind of thing. And that's all done through social media, in fact, through Google Hangouts. At a more basic level, I've seen that done in South Africa really well over the last 3 years, using just USSD for this event. You can look for it on YouTube. Look for this thing called the Carling Cup, and it's the beer brand sponsoring it, and they're getting the fans to select the players and to manage the players during a one-off game once a year, which had tremendous interest.
Hi Paul, great presentation. I run a newspaper company in India. So according to you, which is the media company, news company that is most effectively using this mobile space? And also, if you could share how are they monetizing the space?
Yeah, I mean, yours is a big challenge. Obviously, I mean, I read something yesterday that said that by 2017 newspapers will cease to be significant as a media channel in the US, but that life cycle will take something like another 30 years before it plays out across the rest of the world. So at least your job's secure for the next 30 years. But I think that what we're seeing is that people are turning to mobile for their news source. And so news organizations in general are having to rethink the way in which they deliver news. I'm bound to say I think that there are some really good examples of news organizations who are smart at doing that. The TV-based ones tend to be quicker at working it out than others. So the BBC and CNN, I think, are two standout examples of brands that have figured out how to switch towards delivering simultaneously via mobile. But in the newspaper world, the challenge has been that people have thought people are caught up in thinking with the same mindset that they've used for the existing channels, rather than try to think, what does mobile bring with its new? So I'm actually struggling to think of a really great newspaper brand that has made a great transition into online and then made a great transition into mobile. There have been some magazine publishers that have done it, but I'm struggling, honestly, to think of a really great newspaper example where that has been done, where mobile has acted as a companion to the printed sheet. What I've seen mostly is that people are stuck in this mindset of thinking that everything has to be delivered in exactly the same way as it does in terms of the news, but also then the content or the advertising within that works to the same model. So people are trying to just shift the classified model into the mobile space, and it doesn't really work that way. We need to rethink the way in which we connect with newspapers. Now, there are publishers that have made a success of making mobile open up the content further. So if I think about a very personal example that I think works for me is Wired is a magazine that I think has done a good job of taking their content to both mobile and to tablet in particular, and on the mobile phone that they're good at introducing through various different social media channels, seeding in stories on a daily basis, which we then may read about in more depth in the printed magazine or in the downloadable version of the tablet. What they're also adding on the tablet version, though, is how do you get to greater in-depth in that story? So if I've read a story that's given me some interest and I want to know more, how do I get more into that? So they're providing links for you to delve deeper into the story, or indeed to audiovisual content, so that I can also connect with that. So again, I think it's somewhat early days. I think that people are trying to meet the challenge of how do we deliver something that builds upon an established and trusted brand for news, but use mobile for more of its capabilities than we currently are, rather than just copying from one channel to the next.
Thanks. That will be good.
Paul, I had a question for you. In a market like India, where literacy levels are very low, and also a market like India has exceedingly high mobile penetration, do you see greater opportunities for content, and given the fact that it can be distributed by way of audio as well as video, do you see greater potential for that?
Yeah, actually I do, because I think in many emerging economies, not just because of literacy rates, but also because of economic reasons, people have jumped past the desktop internet age and straight into mobile. And I think that what mobile is going to do is doing is offering people and brands a really interesting way of connecting with consumers, whether or not there are literacy problems. The stuff that has interested me most out of India has been done by Unilever and by Marico. Unilever's Hindustan Wheel is a really interesting campaign that used mobile and recognized that the literacy rates were low, so focused on voice. And I've seen some stuff from Marico as well. And in fact, the CMO of Marico wrote a really interesting piece that was in the Journal of the Institute of Direct Marketing last month, around the approach that Marico takes to using mobile across all of the emerging economies that that they work in. If you haven't seen that, I'll send you guys a link to it. The guy who wrote it from America, I think, is a really, really bright, smart person, and is someone who I follow to look at in terms of what I can learn. One of the interesting things about doing the job I've been doing in working with so many brands across the world is the ability to talk to anyone and everyone across markets, and there are always things that are practiced and done in one market that are absolutely unique to that market and are fantastic solutions to the challenge that you're talking about. I think in particular, I think it's a Marico campaign where they were using outbound messaging from Bollywood stars and from cricketers, so that people recognised the voices, and then were able to just press one key on their phone to get some sort of voucher, which they could then go and use to redeem against getting a product. And that's a solution that works its way around a problem of both literacy and, of course, the multiple languages that you have in India.
Great, thanks, Paul. And we have one last question from Arshad Sukhpariwala. Majority of the apps use customer information which contains sensitive data like credit card, debit card numbers. What should the companies be doing to avoid this data theft? The recent one being.
You ask a really pertinent and timely question, and you have to ask yourself if a company like eBay can have its data hacked and got into, then what can anybody else do of a similar side? I think to a certain extent that kind of incident one highlights the need for greater security within apps and within mobile sites, but also I think has the potential to set the market back a little bit, because it preys upon a consistent concern that people have, which is around privacy. I think the very simple answer is that we've got to be you've got to budget to spend more on security and within the app than people do. The temptation is to think that the easiest thing to do is to get someone to create a really cheap app, and there are of course ways of doing that around the world. That's not unique to any one country. But actually, the challenge here is that if you're going to ask for sensitive data, then you need to build in greater security into that, and also security at your back end. I think there's actually a much more simple thing to think about here as well, is how much of that personal data do you really need? I have an app on my phone called Clueful, and what Clueful does is it lets me see what data every other app on my phone is accessing. And I'm constantly surprised by finding out that apps which I think should only access one particular piece of information are accessing all kinds of things like my address book and my location and other things, and I as a consumer have no means of turning them off unless I just delete the app. So actually I think there needs to be a much more mindful approach from brands, and particularly from the app developers that they work with, around what data you want to access, and have a very good reason for accessing it. Because if you don't, and you run the risk of upsetting people, but if you are accessing tons more data than you need to, then you're creating a challenge for yourself in keeping all of that secure. So there's a twin answer here, which is one which is about do the job better about designing your apps and include better security, and the second thing is around being more mindful about what data that you are collecting and the need for why that's there.
I was wondering if you could hazard of spends by marketers on mobile 5 years from now, or possibly 3 years from now, in terms of percentage terms.
Well, I guess that depends upon what business that you're in and what market that you're in. But let me ask you this question in return. Could you have imagined 5 years ago the impact that the smartphone would have on the market in India? No, you couldn't. I don't think 5 years ago you would have said to me, that penetration rates of smartphones or indeed of feature phones in India would be as high as they are. So given that that would have been impossible to work out 5 years ago, is equally impossible, I think, to predict where it's going to go, except for look at the trajectory. Because I think that's what it tells you is we are becoming a mobile-first world. We are becoming a world where every consumer is a mobile consumer. I don't think any brand has the choice about whether they're going to operate into the mobile space or not. Right now, I see some big brands that operate somewhere around 5% of their budget being spent on mobile. I know that there are other big brands who've declared publicly, like Mondelez, the big global food brand, has declared that they want to shift to 15% of all of their budget being in the mobile space. I suspect the number's going to be a lot higher, because when you get to the point whereby every consumer has a mobile phone and it's with them all day long, and more and more of those phones are smartphones, or at least phones that have greater functionality, that you're going to find that mobile has overcome some of its current challenges. Now, if you'll allow me, because we've talked for an hour, I think that there are some pretty simple challenges to overcome. One of those is around educating marketers as to what mobile is and how it works.
Paul, we are grateful to you for taking out your valuable time this morning in London and being with us. And we will come back to you if we have any other questions. I hope that should be okay with you.
No, it's a huge pleasure, and in fact, today was more one way with me talking to you and you answering me questions. My interest is always to hear the insights back the other way around. So if any of you are happy to share with me insight about what you think is happening in the Indian market, or great case studies that your business is involved in, then please do share it. You have all my contact details through the IAA, and I would love to hear more about what you're doing. And if things work out the way we want them to, then we will be launching our mobile education series and training in India in 2015, and it would be great to be able to connect with you all again.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Good night.